Time for the Renegades to break free and end our Harbinger storyline. Welcome to the complete story series where I take trade paperbacks and single issues and I break them down into digestible bites to help you understand. Then I read them dramatically back to you. All alterations of the balance, text, and images are to prevent copyright problems and all artists owned by respective companies. Wow, I really think I just said all of that. Welcome back to the Harbinger series, guys. I hope you've been enjoying them up to this point, but it's time to bring this to a close. If you do enjoy this series, they have started the new one known as the Renegades, and I'll link that down below. At the end of our last chapter, Peter and the Renegades were actually captured at the end of their fight in Las Vegas. With the help of Monica Jim, a Generation Zero child, they managed to break free from the false worlds that they were placed in. During the final confrontation with Toyo Harada, a massive explosion took out the top floor of the research campus that Peter and the rest were on, allowing them to escape. After receiving the Nobel Prize for Peace for his technologies, Toyo returns to the United States. During his flight, he watches as the hacktivist announces that he will be releasing a massive Project Rising Spirit leak, tens of thousands of pages of information on the inner workings of the organization. As the documents are released, Toyo begins to see the Harbinger Foundation mentioned multiple times throughout the files, and among that information are also blueprints to some of the PRS Hardcore's implants, devices that allowed people to effectively use psionic powers given to them. Toyo then gives the order for his cyber team to shut the site down, and 90 minutes later, a young boy in a hotel room screams, "Douche!" The police had traced the signal coming from the hacker in that hotel room in Los Angeles, and they began to move in. But once they get there, they find nothing except the laptop with an @X displayed on it. Across the breezeway, the young boy looks out seeing the cops raid the room, and he decides that it's time for him to pack up. He wipes all of his computers and he sneaks out through the back and escapes. But the cops soon catch up to the boy in the park, and as the cops arrive, he shouts, "Policia! Policia!" The officers order everyone down and they begin to scan the boy, showing him wearing facial recognition jamming glasses. They run in, slamming the boy's head to the ground, and he says, "Please don't make this all for nothing." Suddenly, the officers hear the sound of a loud screeching noise, and Peter and the Renegades walk up. Charlene tells the boy to cheer up, Octavio, the cavalry's here, and he begins to feel weak. Peter tells him it's cool, he needs a quick scan to see that he wanted to flush them out and rescue him. Once Peter gets what he needs, Torque grabs Octavio and the group leaves. Later that night, Toyo returns to the research campus where they were holding Peter and the others to see how Stronghold is after the incident. Though he's still shaken by the whole mind squall, he keeps hearing a voice in his head, stating that Toyo ran away after the squall. But it wasn't his fault, right? If he could have stopped the squall, he would have, right? Toyo stands there stating that he wants to spend some time with Ingrid, and then Stronghold remembers. Ingrid shielded him during the squall, but he hasn't seen her since. How is she doing? Toyo tells him that she's fine. The truth is, she was badly hurt during the blast. But now that all of PRS's secrets are publicly leaked, Toyo has ordered all Harbinger Foundation members to locate and find the Renegades. But while the Foundation scans all of LA, Peter leads Octavio down into their underground hideout. He explains that there will be rules if Axe wants to stay under the Renegades' protection. They avoid going topside as much as they can. If someone needs to go, they have to go with him since he's the only one who can keep them from being seen. Peter then calls out Monica Jim for introductions, and she changes into a hummingbird, and Faith shouts that she's never seen that one before. Octavio then says that he's read all about them in the PRS documents. At first, it seemed like a lot of misinformation, but he did it. He found real-life superhumans. But now he's feeling a bit lightheaded. Torque tells him that's pretty heavy. He's gonna go play some Xbox now. And Charlene shouts, "No way! It's time for everyone to get to know each other." And just as Charlene and Torque begin to dance, Octavio just sits back and smiles. While everyone else is partying, Peter takes Octavio to talk to Chris, who tells him that what he did was pretty dumb. If the leak begins to become mainstream, it will change the entire game that they are playing. Toyo felt keeping legitimacy important, but now if he's acting outside of his corporation, he will be doing much more dangerous operations. Octavio tells her that she wants to play the Shadow War, right? That's fine, but they don't have to cover up why innocent people die, and neither does she. Peter tells him to just be cool, and Chris tells him that they are off protocol at this point. There's no more prep or planning. If they're going to make any more of their attack scenarios a success, they have to act now. As the three of them discuss their next plan of action, Octavio says that he tried hacking into the Harbinger Foundation, but Harada has that thing locked down tight. The only way to break in and get any information will be if they physically break into the facility and hack the system. Peter says that he thought as much, and he lays out the floor plans for the facility in Pittsburgh, the one that he originally trained in. The plan was originally to break in and destroy the recruitment center for the whole foundation. But if they take him along and he gets the information that he needs, what will he do next? Octavio tells them that if he gets another sizable leak, he will go to the New York Times, The Guardian, and blast the truth all across the mainstream. Harada will have to mind wipe the entire world if he wants to keep it quiet. Outside the hideout though, Monica Jim explores around the homeless. and that's when one of the homeless sees her, and they report back to base that they have a sighting. As Monica Jim returns to her room, Peter stops her, stating that he can't protect her if she is putting them in danger by sneaking out like that. She tells him she doesn't need any protection from him. She hates it down there. The only reason she's here is because the Renegades might be able to help Generation Zero. It's not like she doesn't like him, but once she finds her combat unit, she's gonna be leaving. Because the truth is, he's weak, and she would be much safer without him. The next morning, everyone gathers for breakfast as Peter explains that there's no more time. With the recent leaks, Toyo Harada is going to be seriously fortifying his information from now on. Chris begins to explain the plan, that in 1 week's time, they'll be hitting their target driving across the country. The objective will be to get Axe into the server room so that he can extract as much information as he can. So everyone sync their watches. They're going to be hitting the road exactly at 7. While everyone gets ready, Peter asks Chris if she's ready for this, and she tells him that she's scared. Scared to let him back into her head after, but he stops her, telling her that he knows what she means. He's done everything to try and make up for it, but he knows that it'll never be enough. But they have to do this for each other. Chris hangs her head down and says, right, for the others. Let's just get it over with. And Peter's eyes begin to light up. Once everyone's ready, the Renegades begin to move out to begin their infiltration of the Pittsburgh facility. 2 days later, while Peter and the rest travel by semi, Toya and his men begin to set up their position 30 miles ahead of the semi's route. He tells everyone that he tried to be kind, but those renegades have forced his hand into violence. The truck begins to make its way to Toya's forces, but someone mentions something isn't right, and Toya tells them no, and he begins to tear the truck apart. He jumps onto the back of it and he finds a monitor with Peter in it, and he tells him, "Greeting, Master, but once again, you're too late. We had to find out if you were listening in on our conversation, so we made false dates and times to throw you off. Maybe one day you'll finally do me in, but after what's going to happen next, it won't matter anymore." Over in Pittsburgh, Peter and the rest of them look onto the facility, and Charlene tells everyone that they're gonna be superheroes. Peter reports to Chris that they're in position, and then him, Charlene, Faith, and Torque all head over to that facility. As they get closer, Faith releases the companion field on Torque, and he flies crashing into the building. Back in Oklahoma, Toya receives word that the Pittsburgh building has been breached, and he jets off. Once inside the building, Peter says that crash probably set off some alarms, and just as he finishes his sentence, an attack drone flies out, opening fire on them. Faith quickly flies in, destroying them, but while everyone gets ready to move, Ion begins to make his way up to stop them. Everyone begins to run towards the recruitment center, and Peter tells Faith to make sure that she's recording this. He then says that this represents decades of work for Toya. It is the pool from which he pulls his army from, and if he loses track of this, his organization becomes impossible, and all of the damage done to it will stick. Outside the center, Ion reached the recruitment floor, and Torque charges through the fires, tackling Ion. But before he can do any damage, Ion electrocutes him so much that it renders him motionless. As Ion continues, Faith flies in to save him. Peter begins his work destroying the recruitment center while Charlene and Faith attempt to stop Ion from stopping them. Faith flies past him, grabbing him in the companion field and launching him out the window. But as she does, Ion shocks Faith, causing her to fall out of the air. Charlene chases after him and grabs a hold of Ion to stop him from electrocuting her. But as she does, he begins to burn his head. Ion grabs a hold of Charlene's hair, and soon the both of them are in a fiery ball. The two rocket down to the ground, and between the fire and the electricity, both bodies explode. Faith begins to wake back up and manages to stop herself from hitting the ground, but then she looks back up and sees Charlene and Ion's bodies completely burnt. Seconds later, Peter hears Faith screaming, and he sees Charlene. Peter tells Faith that she needs to get Torque and get as far away as they can. Toya is going to be here at any minute, and just as he says that, Toya bursts into the building and tells him, "It's over! We've already won!" Toya launches Peter out of the building onto a bridge, telling him, "What have you won? I've scanned the building and you didn't get to the servers." Peter stands back up, telling him, "You think we didn't get to the servers? The truth is, your empire is too big to defend." And then Toya stops and asks, "Where's the rest of the Renegades?" Back at the California facility, Octavio says that this is unbelievable. Toya is the only dude in the world with this kind of tech. Chris tells him it doesn't matter, he still can get access, right? And Octavio pulls off his mask, telling her, yeah, as long as Monica Jim does her part and keeps security busy. Back in Pittsburgh, Peter tells Toya that he's going to let him listen in on his telepathic conversations. He needs to hear this. And Chris begins stating that Peter was right. Toya moved almost all of his Psyop personnel out to attack their decoy. Security over at California is a joke. Peter braces himself for an attack and tells Toya that this is what he meant when he said that they've already won. While Octavio continues to work, pulling all of Toya's data out, Chris tells Peter she can't believe it. She's gone and they didn't even get to say any last words. Please talk to her. Tell her what's happening. Peter tells her that he needs to sever the tether. He doesn't want her to feel what's about to happen to him. Just make sure to make it out alive. He loves her. Chris calls out, "What's happening?" And Octavio tells her she's not going to believe what he just found. Chris then reports to Monica Jim that they found it. The Generation Zero children are here. She can guide her to them, and they'll make it out of here fast. Octavio then says it was a bad idea, telling her they need to get out of here now. And that's when Octavio realizes it. Chris just wanted to redirect the security response to the prison break to get them off of them. If they do that, they're just throwing Monica, Jim, and her friends to the wolves. And Chris begins to spray paint something, and she tells him he hasn't seen Generation Zero in action. As the two of them leave, the words, "Flamingo lives," are sprayed across the servers. 4 days later in Pittsburgh, Chris makes her way to the abandoned post office where her and Peter first planned to take on Toyo Harada. Through the shadows, Faith pokes out, hugging her, trying to explain what happened to Charlene, but Chris tells her that she knows. She doesn't have to say it. Back then, Faith flew back carrying Charlene's charred body, but it faded away as she flew back. Chris begins to ask what about Peter, and Faith tells her she doesn't know, but she's not sure that he made it either. That night, Peter and Toya battled as their struggle started to tear apart the civilization bot. As the battle continued, it soon became a battle of the mind, and the two were stopped as a voice tells them that they must listen. Toya turns back to see the bleeding monk telling him that his kingdom is crumbling, and it is time for him to let go of his desire to lead mankind. His role is now over. And as for Peter, he must find solace in knowing that he brought Toya's plan to naught, and to let go of his anger, or it will undo them all. Peter shouts no, Toya has to die, but the monk stops them, stating, "You are both past your usefulness. Everything is back in its place, and now you both must remove yourselves from the stage." The truth is, Toya was made to unlock the science of the Psion mind, and Peter was made to stop Toya before his ambition tore it back down. Toya tells him that he will not accept that. He will find his body in the real world and he will grind him into dust. And as for this one, he will bury his bones in the bottom of the sea. The monk then says he doesn't believe so. Even right now, Peter has come before him with a willingness to die to stop him. Right now, Peter is stripping the both of them down on a subatomic level. They both only have moments to live. Back in the real world, Peter tightens his grip on Toya, and Toya manages to push Peter away and launch himself out of the water. As his body hits the ground, everyone around him begins to pull out their phones and cameras to take pictures of the deformed and beaten Toya. In the current time, Faith asks what about Monica Jim, and Chris says that they had to leave her and Generation Zero behind. After that, Octavio ditched her, stating that he didn't need any of them anymore. Chris then asks what about Torque? Is he... But then she looks up at Torque as a giant projection, and Faith says you can tell her. A little while later, Faith says the guy they fought fried the camera, but hopefully the memory card is fine since the casing didn't melt. And Chris says yeah, they need to get it out to support Octavio's leak. Faith then says that they should probably say a few words since they can't bury their friends. But Chris can't say anything, and then asks, do any of them even really know each other? Faith argues that this all happened because of her. It was her that wanted them to fight the man. And Chris gets up telling them she doesn't have anything to say, and as for Peter, he scared the hell out of her. That's all she has for him. But as she walks off, she bumps into something and then asks if Peter is there. Once everyone settles down to get to sleep, Chris wakes up and finds him sitting in a chair. He tells her that he really tried hard to end things, but still, after everything that they've been to, that's all she has to say about him. And Chris then asks, why is he making everyone think that he's dead? And he tells her because they have won. He doesn't want to be a leader anymore. Being a friend hurts too much. The monk told him things are over and said to let go of his hate, so he's going to try to. But they did it. They avenged Joe. Isn't that what she wanted? And Chris tells him what they wanted, right? As the others sleep, Peter says his goodbyes to Faith and Torque, and finally again to Chris. He walks over, taking off his jacket, and he throws it into the fire before he leaves. Meanwhile, though, the leak on the Harbinger Foundation begins to surface as Toya sits in his office, defeated. And that brings us to the conclusion of the story. There is a little epilogue, but overall, the Renegades are now back in the Valiant universe, and so are the Generation Zero kids. If you've enjoyed any of these stories that have been told over the Harbinger storylines for the last couple of weeks, then make sure you go check out the new storylines. We'll be getting to them when they wrap up. I'm Benny for Comicstorian, and you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Comicstorian, and I'll see you next time right here.